When it comes to spiritual things, Satan would really like us to be cowards. See, when we face the possibility of persecution, ridicule, and even actually discrimination, we can actually be tempted by Satan to be a coward. We see an example of this with Peter. Now, Peter, who was actually willing to defend Christ even to death on the night in which he was betrayed, was actually used as an example of how Satan can manipulate situations so that we respond in a very negative way, not a way that we would actually expect to respond. Now, just prior to the time when Christ was actually going to be betrayed, he talks to Peter and he says that Satan had actually requested that he could sift the disciples, but he was only given permission to actually sift Peter. We see this over in Luke chapter 22, verses 31 and 32. And here it says, "And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has asked for you to sift as wheat. But I have supplicated concerning you in order that your faith should not fall, and when you return to support your brethren." Now, Peter's response to this was his willingness to go to prison, even to actually die for Christ on that night. Luke chapter 22 and verse 33. "And he said to him, Lord, I am ready to be with you, and unto prison and unto death to go." Peter is the one who stood up against the crowd who came for Christ. He was not a coward, but yet Peter was not going to make it through the night without denying Christ. Luke chapter 22 and verse 24, "And he said, I say to you, Peter, the rooster will never crow before you deny to know me 3 times." Now, at that time, I don't think Peter really understood what Jesus was saying. But in the end, what happens is Peter did deny the Lord 3 times. And he did it on that night before the rooster crowed. He wasn't in any danger when he did it either. He did it because Satan had used the situation to cause him to fear when there really was nothing to fear. This broke Peter's heart. And you see that in his response. But afterwards, the Lord restored him. And as a result of that, we can actually see from Peter's experience some very good examples of how to stand against Satan. In the letters that Peter wrote, he talks about this. He says, protecting the sensitive parts of your mind. That would be the part of our mind that involves the thoughts that are going through it, the processing. In 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 13, he says, therefore, gird up the loins of your mind. That's a sensitive part of the workings of your mind. And rest your hope fully upon the grace that is to be brought to us at the revelation of Jesus Christ. He also talks about standing firm against Satan. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brethren in the world. The faith that he's talking about is the armor of God. That set of information that we have of how to actually defend ourselves against an attack from Satan. And once we have put on that armor, we need to stand, just as Peter learned, stand firm. When we were talking about how Satan uses doubt to cause the mind to waver, because it has the inability to actually discern the difference between what is proper and what is wrong in a particular situation, we actually used an example of putting on a mask for the sake of another saint. However, we should not use this as an excuse to not stand against the unrighteousness of those who seek to force submission through usurping authority that they do not have. We should not use this as an excuse for not standing up for our faith. Don't let Satan make a coward out of you, especially when it comes to spiritual things. We need to stand up against unrighteousness, even when we face persecution for it, because we need to stand for the truth. And that standing for the truth can simply be living it out. It's not necessarily a verbal thing, or in other times it is verbal. It is a show of who we are in Christ through our actions, whether it's the removal of that mask or whether it's caring for another saint. The difference, of course, between these two would be a matter of maturity and discerning the difference between what is proper in the situation and what would be wrong. Don't get so focused on the politics of this world that you actually forget about the saints. Because remember, some saints don't understand the freedom that we have or the value of maintaining that freedom as we may. But at the same time, don't be afraid to stand up against unrighteousness. Don't be afraid to show who you are in Christ. Because remember, we are called to be luminaries in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. And we cannot do that if we're being cowards.